Okay, so thank you very much, Colleen. Thank you for that brief interlude, sharing of some slides and some critical information regarding fatherhood and fathering. Colleagues, well-wishers, participants, good evening. My name is Joseph Heron. I'll be your host for today's proceedings. We promise a pretty interesting evening of discussion surrounding this project of affirming fatherhood. You would have just been introduced to those slides that with some statistics on it, and we challenge you to just think about your experience with fathering, with fatherhood, and the possibilities that it opens up to, right? I have to mention just briefly how the positive involvement that fathers can have. We would have seen, and I don't want to go too much into the slides that would have shown you just now, but in my professional experience, father involvement is critical on either side of the spectrum, producing positives and negatives. Involvement has a high positive, and the lack of involvement has high negatives as well, from criminality to scholarships, from success in business, success in crime. Yeah. And hence the drive behind parenting, affirming fatherhood, is not limited to just fatherhood. It is really aimed at strengthening the family. As a country, our family values, our family structures, our families are breaking down. And the only way to fix it is go back to strengthening our families and creating that very strong village that we have. Now, affirming fatherhood, while it does stress on fatherhood, it is not aimed at patriarchal men's rights agenda or a feminist agenda. We need to make that absolutely clear before we go any further. Yeah, the ultimate aim, ultimate goal is to fix our families, and our view is families perform better, produce better once both parents are balanced and positively contributing to strengthening the family. It's as simple as that. That's all we want to do, to produce healthy children, healthy relationships, and produce and contribute positively to our land of Jamaica and the wider Caribbean. Yeah. So just to bring you an update, when we would have been hosting, this is the 5th conversation. There are persons here. I'm curious to know, is there anybody, you can just raise your hand if you don't want to open your mic, you don't have to. Is there anybody who has been with us from the very first conversation? This is the 5th conversation. So have you all been, who among us has been here all four previous conversations? I'm really very curious about that. Anybody? All 4 conversations before? How about the previous? How about 3 of the previous 4? Lord man, not doing so. 2 of the previous 4? I'm seeing some names that I've seen before in previous conversations, but I don't want to call persons' names if they're not going to Oh, I see a hand up. Charlene's hand is up. Charlene's hand is up. You know, in the chat, Mr. Eric, he's saying this is the first time you learn about it. You just learn about it wonderfully, which means that you will be present for the future conversations. Wonderful. Thank you, Eric. Eric, where are you from, may I ask? Feel free to open your mic. St. Martin, excellent. Thank you for joining.
So was just indicated as well.
Mr. Sargent is just coming in. We know we've seen him before.
Right.
Good.
Fabulous. So we're growing in numbers, and we appreciate that you share our vision. So let me tell you, let me remind you that this is the 5th conversation. The very first conversation would have taken place in April 23rd, where we focused on single fathers, stepfathers, pretty much all fathers, just introduce the topic, introduce what we want to do, and open up some exciting conversations, right? The second conversation was on the 28th of May, yeah? And pretty much the same thing that we would have focused on. We would have worked on, gone on to creating space for have that discussion regarding affirming fatherhood, right? We focus on strengthening parenting skills and encourage each other to identify the areas that we need to strengthen as fathers and as parents. Yep. The third conversation on July 2nd, we zeroed in and spoke about father's care, not just the physical health, but also critically the mental health and the combination thereof. We had Dr. Agri Irons, who came and spoke specifically on children, adolescents, right? And how father involvement can affect father health, father mental involvement, how critical it is. A wonderful discussion as well. Yeah. And I added some rich, very, very rich information to the conversation where fatherhood is concerned. And lastly, our very last conversation surrounded paternity leave. And we would have had several persons. We had panelists who would have given their perspective on the benefits of paternity leave. Yeah. We would have had persons from as far as Canada, a Jamaican living in Canada, and the importance of paternity leave for him. We had a Bajan Anderson Langdon who spoke about his experience with paternity leave, and our Jamaican living in Jamaica, Stephen Whittingham, who also spoke on importance. He took paternity leave, he was the first person to take paternity leave in his firm, his company, and the importance of what he would have garnered and gained from taking paternity leave. He would have indicated that he would have seen a difference between his children. I mean, child was recently born, but how he felt and how more involved he felt and how rich he felt regarding the interaction between him and his latest child from inception, and more bonding time immediately after birth compared to the others. And of course, finally, this current conversation is where we are, and we want to take it to the next level. Yeah. So for today, how do women and men impact fatherhood? That is plain and simple what we want to look at. Yeah. Now, why this came up is we know that, simply put, a man cannot be a father without a woman. Likewise, a woman can't be a father without a man. And so we want to look at, pardon me?
A mother.
A mother. Thank you very much for that correction. So we want to look at the various ways how we all as a society can contribute. And we felt like it was critical that we put men in one group, but women in another group, to allow freedom of speaking. You know, sometimes some things come out when persons are among their own gender. Yeah. So if it was critical that we go into breakout rooms. So that's what we will be doing this evening. Yeah. And with us, we have two persons who will host and lead the discussion in the groups. Now, I'm gonna introduce them quickly. I must tell you the history of this, because we felt that we needed a moderator. Yeah. And then our esteemed Blacker would have said, well, if we have a moderator, well, I have a faderator. Yeah. So that pun, Blacker has a wonderful way of playing with words, you know. So we have a faderator in Creig Kinch, and we have a moderator in the form of Kellyanne Knight. Yeah. So we're gonna go into breakout rooms shortly, following which we're gonna come back and we're gonna discuss what we would have discussed, the notes from the breakout rooms, right? We're gonna, I anticipate a rich discussion in both breakout rooms. Yeah. So I'm gonna pause now. And Brian, I saw you here, Brian. Brian will be performing for us or reading for us one of our own Blackers poems. And this poem is powerful. So over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Joseph. Greetings, everybody. This piece is called Making Man, of course, written by the great Owen Blacker Ellis. Many mothers standing solo, breeding bread from brown earth, measuring and weighing, pampering and praying, playing, sewing and sewing to shape composure, cut consciousness, and milk manners from reluctant chests. Mostly women, weaning and wrestling to filter dread, daring and lust for danger, to chisel the rough edges of anger, sift and strain fluids of strife, and keep composure while composing character. But man carry man, and more doing what they can, reporting for duty, slowly, quietly. Maybe recovering patriarch could reproduce himself that we may green, ground, and grow boys into gentler greatness, making new man more human. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That wasn't just a performance. I felt the words, very, very powerful piece. And every time I hear that piece and read the piece, awesome. Thank you so much. It's like you yourself write it. So in the chat, we have, I'm gonna read some stuff from in the chat. So Eric, yes, the conversations would have been recorded. We will try and they're on YouTube, colleagues. They're on YouTube. So go to YouTube, punch in Parenting Partners Caribbean. All the conversation, the previous conversation have been made available at any time. Simple as that, right? Ricardo from Florida, living in Florida, from Barbados. Thank you for joining. Fabian, wonderful. The new faces are the new names. I'm seeing quite a few. This is really, really encouraging. It means you're sharing our vision. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah. So we're going to continue. Kelly and Creig, I hope you're all ready. Hope you're both ready. So Kelly is in Barbados, and she's a gender and development specialist and human rights advocate. Her professional experience and extensive volunteer service spans areas of gender equality and justice, women's and girls' rights, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and gender-based violence and advocacy for persons living with HIV and AIDS. So Kelly, welcome, and you come highly recommended. I'm sure we're all looking forward to your expertise and guidance. So Creig is the governor of the Optimist International Caribbean District, spanning 91 clubs with 3,500 members in Anguilla, Antigua, Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Jamaica, the Bahamas, and the Cayman Islands, right? The Optimist International Caribbean District forms part of the Optimist International, a worldwide volunteer service. It's a service organization on a mission to help children and communities to maximize their potential. And he's also a lawyer. Which one is more important, right, Creig? But he's very passionate about service, advocacy, and mentorship as a lawyer, and is on a mission to empower youth across the region and the world. So we can all see that both Kelly and Creig would share the vision of affirming fatherhood, one advocate and one seeking to empower youth across the world. nothing, no avenue better to empower youth through strengthening our families. Yeah, colleagues? So let me stop here. Let me pause because we're now gonna go into our breakout rooms. Colleagues, please, everybody, don't hold your tongue. Talk freely. And your host, I'm sure they will guide you along the way. Yeah. Wonderful. So we're back. Thank you. That would have lasted longer than we would have provided time, which is a good thing. Yeah. So just to be certain, we would have discussed the questions. In what ways do women affirm fatherhood and how? And of course, the women would include mothers, sisters, friends, pretty much any woman, right? And we all know what it takes to be a woman, right? In what ways, or the second question, in what ways do men affirm fatherhood and how? And of course, by men, we mean fathers, sisters, any other male member of the family or persons considered simply male. We want to reflect on their own mothers, their own fathers, their own children, brothers, and so forth, previous relationships. So we want to go into all of that. And I think, well, in the male group, those were discussed. What impact do multiple relationships have on mothering and fathering? And the final question was, what actions, activities, words would we encourage men and women to do towards affirming fathers, right? So I am going to yield to have both groups led by the respective moderator and faderator to report back and share their thoughts, following which we can have a brief discussion from either side and the reaction to the discussion that would have been shared, to the thoughts that would have been shared. So I'm going to ask Kelly, do you mind going first? Or your group going first?
Yeah, sure. Anyone from the women's group want to volunteer to mention things that we shared? Sharitza, Raven, anyone? No? I'll go ahead then. We basically went through the questions and we talked about the family unit as a whole. So the village as part of our system and ways of affirming fatherhood, because children are at the center of what we set out to do. So physical and mental well-being and strengthening the entire family was something that we talked about as important. So the bond between parents and their children, how children look up to their fathers as nurturers, which is something interesting that came out because often in our societies we attach nurturer to women. So looking at fatherhood then and now, and how before men were often took on the role as disciplinarian and those things. Now fathers are more nurturing than before. Some of the fathers are taking on different roles and fathering their children in different ways. We looked at and we talked about stories of fatherhood and how sometimes our fathers were absent and how our parents or women dealt with fathers being absent and the things that we said to children and how that impacted the children, negative things that were told to the children, and looked at how being a single mother and not having a father present impacted women's struggle in looking after their children, and doing it alone, and how that impacted the women in every way, not only financially, but mentally and emotionally. Looking at the impact as children, and then how that spin off into the relationships then that women have, and then ending up in situations where their children do not have fathers, and how that impacted their children as well, and then making a conscious effort for that not to happen to their children, by trying to foster good relationships with their children's fathers, so that their child would have a different experience. We also talked about affirming fatherhood and giving in ways that we as women should give men space to father and not micromanage and those type of things. Give men space and encouragement to father, as fatherhood and parenting is a learning process, that there's no one set rule or manual that tells you how to parent perfectly. It is a process that should be shared. We also looked at class and socioeconomic background, different ways how that impacts fatherhood, and how absent fathers in homes that are on the lower income bracket are impacted. Actions and activities. Fatherhood, we have to be realistic about parenting. Respect is important. We want fathers to be accountable and take on their responsibilities as fathers. And I think I'm going to stop here and let Creig share.
Sure, thank you very much, Kellyanne. So I think a lot of what you said also came out in the men's group. One of the things that the men pointed out is that women help to affirm fatherhood when they allow the fathers to really take on the role of fathering, and when they encourage them in that role. We also had a discussion around the nurturing role of a father, because we were very well aware, and I think it came out in what you would have said, that very often society sees the father as being the disciplinarian. You usually hear, wait till your father gets home. And that statement usually comes with the connotation that your father is going to discipline you for whatever wrong you would have done when your father comes home. And we realize that we do need to make a shift. We need to make a shift where we realize that the father has a wider and more important role, which also goes to nurturing and caring for the children. And we did go off a little bit on a tangent as we discussed the fact that, fathers have just an important role as mothers in the family situation. And fathers equally can play the role of being the major caregiver, being the person who can help to mold, mentor, and nurture a child. We also realize that it's a partnership between mothers and fathers. And it doesn't make a difference as to whether or not it's a situation where the mother of your child may still be in a relationship with you or not. If you happen to be estranged, if you've broken up, there is still a partnership between the mother and the father. And there needs to be mutual respect for each other and mutual understanding of the role of fatherhood. And we did speak a little bit about the importance of women in our homes, women in society, women within our wider family, also acknowledging the importance that fathers have in the life of children. And we really got into a discussion about the fact that once once our partners, once women model in front of children that important role that the father has in the family, then it allows for a greater affirmation of that role. And then future generations can be able to see that the role of father is a very important one. Someone made the comment that as a society, we tend to seem to appreciate the role of mother more than the role of the father. Sometimes we don't see it as being a worthy role. And so we do want to challenge that idea and ensure that we do have more validation of the role of the father and the importance that it plays within the family. So I don't know, Kellyanne, if you want to go on to the next question, which is, in what ways do men affirm fatherhood?
Well, I summed up everything in the little short bit that I give, but I want to touch on something that you just mentioned to tease it out a bit more in terms of appreciating the role of fatherhood. Can you elaborate a bit more on the discussion that you had in terms of appreciating fatherhood and how women are more appreciated in society? Is that the case? Does this appreciation for women in society and mothering also come with a lot more responsibilities for parenting? Can you elaborate a bit more about the discussion that the guys had, the men had? And feel free, everyone, to share in the discussion. It's our discussion, and I want to hear from everybody as well.
Okay. So before we take comments generally, to answer your question, one of the things that we really looked at is that in our society now, for the most part, both men and women are going to work. And so it is a situation where, in the past, you may have found that women were at home more, and so they took on more of the domestic responsibilities and roles. But here it is now that we do have a situation where both parents are working. And so it's seen that equally, both parents have to help share the load. And in that regard, what we are seeing is that men have an equal role to play in the family. And so it should not just be a situation where, for example, the wider society just sees the role of taking care of the child as being a mother's role, but rather it is a role for both the father and the mother. And so when we were having discussions around the affirmation of fatherhood by women, it was a conversation around the fact that men should be recognized for the role that they play in the household, within the family, as it relates to sharing the load of taking care of the child. As it relates to conversations around how we see men affirming each other, we had a whole set of conversation around the fact that men, we need to acknowledge that we do need help. We need to create positive and model positive behavior, and we need to support each other in our roles as fathers. And we also really got into the whole point of we need to ensure that we do communicate with our significant others, our spouses, the mothers of our children, and also communicate with our children as well. And also lean on each other for support. So that definitely was something that we did speak about. And I'm sure we'll probably get into the conversation about multiple relationships. But one of the things that came out there is that it is difficult navigating multiple relationships, especially where you have a situation where you may have, as we say, a child mother, but you may be in another relationship and there may be children in that relationship. How do you navigate that? And we realize that there is some difficulty in that. But I think we can open up the conversation further to see if any of our participants want to add anything to any of the questions that we would have discussed tonight.
Yeah, good idea. See
I see the
Janet.
hand of Janet.
Right.
It's hard for me to keep my mouth shut because it was in the 90s that I did research on fatherhood in the Caribbean. And there's a lot been written since then, but I wanted to just make a point about the fact that has not been raised, and that's how do mothers and fathers prepare their sons and daughters about fatherhood and about motherhood. And I know when we did our research, it was very often said that the messages to the boys were go for it early. Yay, you did it. You got one. You're a man. This is wonderful. It didn't have anything to do with being a father. While girls were, of course, warned, don't go near them. They can't be trusted. Wait till you're finished all your schooling and blah, blah, blah. So what do we tell our boys and girls in preparation? If we wait till they're already parents, I think it's too late. I mean, I won't say anything more. There's a lot more backative behind that. But
Go ahead, Sharitza.
Thank you so much, Joseph. In addition to what Janet just mentioned, I was thinking also as well about the role of grandparents, because we know in Caribbean society that grandparents also play an important role. So mothers would be talking to their daughters about how a man should treat you, and vice versa with their sons and fathers, and how that plays across the lifespan. So now you have these adults where their parents play an important role, not only in the raising of the children, but in terms of providing that guidance. In our society, it goes way beyond the nuclear family situation where it's just mother and father. And what about the role of the external relatives in affirming the role of mothers and fathers before affirming the role of parents?
And as an extension, go beyond grandparents. And in the men's group, correct me if I'm wrong, Creig, but the village would have been mentioned, and who is in that village, and which men and which women are in that village, and the role that they play. Yeah. So absolutely. If I may, I want to jump to a scenario where this is a scenario that actually took place, where a young man in his 20s has fathered a child, and the mother of the child decides that she's not going to keep the child. And what the father does, he carries the child to his mother. And I have other examples of mothers taking on their son's children, or a sister taking on her brother's child. And my question is that affirming fatherhood? How much is it allowing the father to be responsible? Are you, I understand that there may be various other factors involved, right? But it is a very common thing within our society that when a man has a child, is fathering a child, and for whatever reason, the mother is no longer involved, fathers generally just, I don't want to say generally, it has happened, just pass them on to another female member of his family, or another female member of the mother's family. And also there's some who simply believe that the man not to raise a picnic, but the man should not raise a child on his own. And now there are many examples of fathers raising children on their own, but I wanted to zero in on scenarios like that, because for me, that kind of reinforces the whole notion of how undervalued fathers or fathering can be. Yeah, I see two hands. I see Edwin, Taitu, and then Ricardo. In that order, can we go? Go ahead, Edwin.
Yeah, that's right. Good. In relation to the scenario you just painted, I've known the situation which, well, all depends on the circumstances that are presented. Because if you have a guy who he brings the child since his mom is not working and says, okay, hold the child while I am going out to work. When I come back home, I'll look after them. I'll look after the child and make sure everything's in order with them. That's one thing. If he's just dropping the child at his mother or the female just so that they can look after the child and he wants to do whatever, that's something that is not, well, should never be encouraged. I know a lady who she has a daughter and her mom had told her back in the day, you can go to work and do whatever. As soon as you're finished work, you come home, your child is at you. You have to look after them. And she said she would go off on mornings, leave her daughter with her mom. She would go to work. And so when she came home, as soon as she got off the bus, her mother would be waiting with her daughter at the bus stop. So as soon as she got off the bus, her daughter was placed in her hand. And the mother showed her that was responsibility. There are people who do that. I will never say a guy should be encouraged to run around. There are some women who are, and men, of course, who, for whatever reason, something went horrible in the relationship, but the child is still there. The child needs to be taken care of. But I would say we need to judge the scenario by what circumstances are there, and not just say, okay, lump that men that just leave the child with their mom or female relative is not doing the right thing. It will more be, let's look at the circumstances and according to the scenario, and then judge each one on its own merit.
I totally agree. I just want us to look at the general message. And I'm not sure who would have also mentioned earlier in terms of how do we prepare our men to become fathers. So that man who simply passes on his child to a female relative would not have been empowered, you know, because that scenario just would have, Edwin, that you would have mentioned. I'm curious.
Right. I want to ask one more thing, because
yes,
as you can tell, I'm from Barbados. So is it the same across every Caribbean country? Because
regarding what?
It may be how that is looked at. Is it the same way? Is it where that men, don't really raise children? Because when I was here growing up, granted, the father would be out of the house most of the time, so he won't really be in the home looking after the child most of the time. But that's because he'll be the person working, and the mom would normally, well, I'm old enough that the moms normally would not need to work, so they'll be home all the time. But the fathers, when they got home, they still spent an hour or two every day with their children. That was commonplace for when I came up. So I have traveled the Caribbean, been to Ghana, been to St. Vincent, and had people that are from different countries, and everything is not the same. I've been to Ghana, and they have some guys, they can't wash, they don't cook, they don't do anything. And when we went down there, we washed, we cooked, we cleaned. But certain guys down there, they didn't lift a hand to do anything. So I know it's not the same for each Caribbean country. Certain societies will say, okay, men and women do this, and other ones will say, no, men and women don't just do this. You must also do something else. So that's something I also would like us to really delve, if we can delve into. Is it the same across each Caribbean country, or is it more one place as opposed to the other?
I hear what you're saying, and I agree. No, we are strapped for time, and we want to do some wrapping up and final recommendations. So we can aim to end at 8 o'clock. But we hear what you're saying. We hear what you're saying anyway. But we had two other hands that we could take before we do some wrapping up and some recommendations. It was Titu and then Ricardo, and some other persons may have joined. We can do some wrapping up and get some summation for those persons who may have come in after. So go ahead, Taitu.
I hope I remember what I was planning to say. The essential point that I wanted to raise in response to what you had spoken about, breaking the patterns of expecting female members of the families to take on parenting or fathering, for want of a better word, whenever something happens with the primary parent, with the mother, and then the father doesn't accept full responsibility by taking the child himself to raise, but rather hands. That's the point I wanted to speak about. It's something that I have seen across the region. I've seen it here in Barbados as well, where I'm living. But one of the things that I wanted to also point out is that there is need for more research, because there is a generational shift.
Yes.
There is a generational shift based on female participation in the labor force, insofar as some family members, whether it's a sibling, whether it's an aunt, because of the economic situation, they simply don't have that time to take over the parenting of a brother's child or of a son's child. So it is once upon a time, it may have been possible, but it's not as possible. So I think more research needs to check those kinds of things. And I think at an emotional level, there's also the pushback to say, listen, this is your child. You need to be the primary parent in the absence of the mother. So I will support you as a community member. And I think may have been Edwin that said that does happen. That is true. So there was a push to say, I will support you as a community, as a family member, as we all should, you know. But the idea is that if the mother disappears or if the father disappears, the primary parent that is left is the one that should still have full responsibility for rearing the child. And I think that is definitely shifting in terms of how we respond as a community when things like that happen. But I think we need more research to actually show what these changes have been looking like. And I think looking at that, we can't look at that without looking at the changes in the labor market, in employment, and in the economic situation, you know, because we raise, parents go to work, you know, and I think that is kind of what I wanted to really bring to the discussion, because sometimes we talk about it as if adults, you have parents who don't work, and then you have adults who work, and then I'm trying to remember, there's a phrase I saw, you know, as if parents don't go to work, and then you have workers who don't parent, and parents who don't work, whereas it's one and the same population. So I think there's more need to understand that integration and how that has an impact on child rearing. So I'll leave it right there.
All right, thank you for that, Taitu. We have Ricardo. Are you still with us? You still want to add your 2 cents?
Yes. Can you hear me? Because I was having some issues with my audio.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. As the story was told to me, at 3 months old, my mother had a dispute. I ended up living with my aunt, my father's sister, for the rest of my life, basically. And it taught me, and one of the questions I have to ask is it possible for bad parenting to result in a good parent? Why I ask that is, I remember as a youngster, I craved attention from both my mother and my father. As I said, I never grew up with and I never lived in a household with either of them. They were not far from me, but I was raised by my aunt. And it taught me to, for lack of a better term, it taught me that what not to do as a parent. What not to do as a parent, because the attention I craved from both my mother and father, I didn't get, but I learned that they still had their lives to live, both my mother and my father. My father, although he wasn't there, he was still, when he was there, instilling me to the importance of being educated. The importance of being educated. And that was the extent of his parenting, making sure that I kept up my education, I went to school and stuff like that. It taught me to pass that importance on to my children, of course. And then it helped me to understand what a child basically craves in terms of attention, discipline, and love and understanding from a mother or a father in either case. So it to me, and well, sorry, it to me, as I said in the beginning, it taught me to establish that a bad parent can result, in my mind, in being a good parent in terms of you taking those examples and saying to yourself, okay, well, I know well not to do this with my child, so it helped me build that strength to be a good parent.
Absolutely, Ricardo. You would have answered your own question. You know, so thank you for that. We have one final comment from Glynis, and then we will go into wrapping up and moving forward. Sharitza, you mind muting your mic, please? Go ahead, Glynis.
Okay, 3 very quick things to the last person who spoke. Absolutely, as was said, you did answer your question. You can, in fact, use a bad parenting experience and make a paradigm shift in your own parenting practices. But to respond to Janet, I think we have a fundamental problem in terms of before you become a father, before you become a parent, how do you start sensitizing persons to the role of parenting and so on. And our society, I find increasingly, is having a challenge with our attitudes towards sex. Sex is increasingly becoming recreational, just a recreational exercise. Childbearing, the possibilities of childbearing is like Russian roulette. So you know, you may or you may not get the child, but we're going to do it anyway. They also too, the child, very often the emotional bonding with children, I find increasingly, even within seemingly well-structured families, homes, it's at a lot of distance. The child is seen like almost an intrusion. We're going to feed you, we're going to clothe you, we're going to school you. That's enough. What more do you want from me, kind of a thing. And so very often the issues of parenting has little to do with providing for their needs, but sometimes creating that emotional bonding. And I find our society is drifting farther and farther away, in spite of interventions such as what we here are doing and other bodies are doing, from emotional bonding with our children and making them feel special and guiding them appropriately to develop as whole persons. And like I said, the issue of sex is fundamental. The cause of the child is always at the heart of it all. Changing our attitudes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Glynis. So we are wrapping up. We're coming to the final segment of this evening's conversation. And I really do appreciate everybody, every single person being involved in the conversation. Now, going forward, because this is the 5th of what we want to be many conversations. We also want to go out and leave the virtual space and go out into the communities, the schools in the various Caribbean spaces. Yeah. But recommendations going forward, I will leave it open for our moderator and faderator, Creig and Kellyanne. Recommendations from your perspective based on your group interactions. What will be your recommendations going forward, and following which I will ask, or should I take persons before and then Kelly and Creig? Well, I see in the chat, I see Title says research, a conscious effort to break cycles and doing research. But I will leave it there. Kelly and Creig, please, your recommendations as we move forward.
Okay. To reiterate what I said and what came out of the group, giving fathers space to parent, is important, and supporting them in every way, allowing us as parents together to make mistakes and managing conflicts away from the children, most of the time away from the children. Children also need to see parents work out conflicts in amicable ways, in ways that are healthy. That will also give them good examples to live by and how to manage relationships. So parenting, giving fathers space, talking as parents, regardless of the types of relationships the parents have, in working out differences for the betterment of the children. Our group also talked about village, and I think that what we are doing here is part of our village. The stories that person shared, I thank participants for sharing their own personal stories. And sometimes when we share in that way, instead of just talking, someone talking to us or having a lecture, conversations like these to me and to persons are important in having those informal discussions and expressing the different ways we were raised and how that impacted us and how we could go forward in making ourselves better. So the village is important, love and kindness is important, and giving men the affirmations to continue and to do, and let them know that we as a community are supporting them, and also for men to acknowledge that their responsibility is to their child, regardless, and to their children, regardless of the relationship with the mother. Sometimes it's a difficult situation, as persons have pointed out, but their responsibility, no matter what, is to their child and to the well-being of their child, emotionally, physically, financially, in every way. So that's it for me.
From our end as a men's group, and it's interesting that Kelly would have ended with that sage advice to men, and something that actually came out in our group, where we recognize that relationships may be broken, and we may have situations where it might be hard for fathers to step up and take on the role of fatherhood. But one of the things that came out in our conversation is, no matter how hard it may seem, no matter how impossible it may seem, fathers are called always to step up to the plate and be good, positive role models to their children, and to really be good fathers, no matter the situation that they may find themselves in. I think for us as a men's group, one of the things that we really want to see is, we want to see the role of fatherhood being honored equally as the role of motherhood. And we definitely appreciate all of the affirmations coming from women, recognizing the importance of the role of the father within the family unit. And we also want to challenge fellow men in their roles as fathers. We want to challenge them to open up where they're having difficulties, where they're experiencing challenges within that space, that they also talk to other men, because it may surprise you that other men may have gone through similar issues and problems that you may be facing right now, and we may be able to help you and offer advice in those situations. One of the things that really came out in our group is the fact that as men, we need to really tap into our emotions more, and we need to recognize that we are just not stern, stoic individuals, but we are made up of emotions. And we have to have some level of emotional intelligence to be able to deal with our emotions in a constructive way. And as we seek to affirm our fathers, we need to ensure that we help each other, working through our emotions, working through our problems, and really stepping up to be positive, wonderful fathers in whatever space we find ourselves in.
All right, thank you both. So we're coming down. Now I'm gonna ask if there's anybody else. I see Janet's hand. If there's anybody else who wants to add to what both Kelly and Creig would have added in terms of recommendations going forward then we would take that hand after Janet. You want to go ahead?
Very briefly, just to say that we have to underscore, and I don't think we have enough tonight, how much joy men can have in being a good father. The benefits, the joys, the pleasures, the enriching, the self-esteem. You know, there's a lot of positives for men themselves, not just for children. That's all I want to say.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Janet. Is there anybody who want to add in terms of recommendations going forward as to ways either gender or as a society itself, we as a Caribbean people, as Black people, can simply affirm fatherhood with the ultimate goal of changing our family experience as we speak right now? And so, okay, nobody's would like to add anything briefly. Okay, wonderful.
Just
Yes,
quickly,
Colleen.
Joseph, just quickly, I want to say that, you know, while we talk about space for men to open up and so on, and I'm very mindful of some of the words that we use. And I think that's one of the things that we wanted to, you know, somebody spoke about, I think Kellyanne said that, you know, seeing parents resolve conflicts in reasonable and, you know, positive ways. And sometimes the words that we use, and even just saying things like giving fathers space, which sort of intimates that we have the space and we will let you have some. So I think sometimes when we use certain words, and again, you know, based on what everybody had said in the earlier discussion, the society in which we live, it sort of underscores that, you know, the women are the ones who really have the nurturing and so on, and that, you know, a single father is sort of an anomaly. But if we affirm in a way that a father is a parent as a mother is a parent, rather than us saying things like, you know, well, we have to give them more space or we have to allow them to do this. It still sounds as if the power is with the mother or the female caregiver. So I'm just saying that sometimes the words that we use are, while we're saying and doing and, you know, trying to be very positive, sometimes the words that we use sometimes can sort of undercut what we're really trying to achieve.
If I may add here, Colleen, I was relaying what one of the participants mentioned in terms of giving an example of how the mother was accustomed doing everything and not giving the father an opportunity to do it. And to have the space for him to have the children on his own and have that space to parent and to learn and to figure it out. That's what I meant when I say give space.
Yeah, no, I understand what you meant, but I'm just saying generally, sometimes, you know, we say these things and it's not quite what we intend. But I took your point, certainly, Kellyanne, from your group.
Okay. Wonderful. What an evening of such rich discussion. And I hope that our next conversation will be just as rich as we affirm fatherhood and we affirm familyhood. You know, we value our fathers, value our mothers, and we move hand in hand as we change the narrative where the family is concerned. Some very excellent points would have been made in bringing fatherhood to a particular value, where our children will experience positive fathers, whether those positive fathers are living in the home or are involved in visiting relationships. And so, colleagues, thank you very much. On that note, it has been a wonderful conversation. And I don't think Brian is here, but that poem that he read was a wonderful start and a wonderful inspiration, and hopefully we will be able to carry this to the wider community. Yeah. So thanks again, Kelly, And Creig, you have been wonderful in your hosting, you know, your leadership, Creig and Kelly. Thank you very, very much. And we appreciate you both.
Thank you.
You all walk good
Thank you.
and take care.